What is going on, everybody? Welcome in to the reveal of the number 29 team in my 2021 NFL Power Rankings with a deep dive into the Philadelphia Eagles. A quick reminder before we get started, please do hit that like button down below. It really does help support the series. Share this video. You guys have been showing up big time with the likes, the sharing of the video, just the compliments in general. I appreciate you so much for watching. If you are new and you enjoy this deep dive into the Eagles, I do encourage you to subscribe and turn on notifications down below so that you don't miss any more Power Rankings deep dive reveals as we go. So the Philadelphia Eagles here coming in at number 29 in the Power Rankings at a bit of a crossroads in their organization. Obviously having won that Super Bowl, 3-4 years ago. And a lot has changed, but the core of this team really intact as well. And they're one of these teams kind of trying to milk out a window, but also maybe playing with some ideas with the future, collecting some future draft picks, kind of 1 foot in, 1 foot out in the quarterback situation. So one of the more unique teams that we're going to talk about in this series, just as far as where they're at as an organization. So let's recap their offseason. It was an interesting one. Going through their key departures, key additions here. So obviously the entire staff overhauled here. Doug Peterson out, Jim Schwartz out, good riddance. I thought Doug Peterson was completely living off of the glory days of winning that Super Bowl. You watched the Eagles last year, snap by snap, and they were clearly one of the worst coached, most ill-prepared teams in the league. I've said this before, but they definitely led the NFL in snap to what the hell is going on in this play snaps in the NFL. Just dysfunction across the board, and it really just spread throughout the organization. I think you can point to a lot of that hurting Carson Wentz and ultimately leading to them moving on from Carson Wentz at that quarterback position as well. So while you have the coach and quarterback on the way out here, the rest of the team is more or less intact. Really, the only key departures here from this team is going to be Jalen Mills, who had a nice year as kind of that hybrid safety that was brought over to New England to play that same role. But, they lost Alshon Jeffrey, Deshaun Jackson. He didn't really play for this team. They're kind of getting everybody back for the most part. So the key additions this offseason, it's going to be the staff as we talk about Nick Sirianni coming over from Indianapolis, along with Jonathan Gannon, defensive coordinator for Indianapolis. A couple guys that were definitely flying under the radar as head coach candidates. This wasn't exactly the most desirable job out there, but I don't think that means that Nick Sirianni or Jonathan Gannon were underqualified for the job. We'll talk a lot about what they're going to bring to the table, the types of system on offense and defense that this team will run. And then they bring in Anthony Harris to actually be an upgrade to Jalen Mills for a lot cheaper. So that was a really nice under-the-radar move that this Eagles team made. And then a really nice draft highlighted by DeVante Smith and Landon Dickerson actually getting a first-round pick in the future from the Miami Dolphins to move down and ultimately end up with the player that I thought they could have taken at 6 overall in the draft anyway. So for Howie Roseman and the general manager here, he is not exactly a fan favorite with the Eagles right now, but he's a guy that I have defended because I thought he, at a point in time, was the premier general manager in the NFL back when this team was a Super Bowl contender. And he definitely had a falling from grace with a lot of the stuff that has transpired in Philadelphia, 2018, 2019, the infamous selection of J.J. Arcega-Whiteside over DK Metcalf. But to me, this was an offseason where Howie Roseman definitely earned a lot of that respect back and reminded people that he knows what he's doing. So a really impressive offseason, all things considered, for the Eagles. But ultimately, this is all going to hinge around the quarterback here, Jalen Hurts, taking over with Carson Wentz heading out. So let's transition there to the quarterback conversation. So I'm just going to get this out of the way. The Philadelphia Eagles rank 31st in the NFL at quarterback. Jalen Hurts, like it or hate it, has so much to prove. Now, the highs are totally there. That's why this team traded Wentz. It's why this team didn't draft, say, a Justin Fields. The highs are good enough that they're willing to find out how much that progression can be. this year. And it's not just the on the field, the big plays, the play extension, the big throws down the field, the improved accuracy since his time at Alabama. It's the leadership and the work ethic that he brings to the table. They genuinely believe in this human to develop and be one of those quarterbacks that has that chip on his shoulder, first one in, last one out mentality that we talk about kind of being a requirement to become an elite quarterback. So you love all those things, and you believe in all of those things. But on the field, Jalen Hurts right now is exactly what he was coming out of Oklahoma, a prospect at the position. We cannot say with any confidence that he is a top 32 quarterback in the NFL right now. So like I mentioned, you love the highs there with Jalen Hurts, and they're enough to bet on there. But what are the lows and what are the knockbacks here with Jalen Hurts? Well, number one, when you hear a analyst or a coach describe a first read quarterback, I kid you not, if you have a Game Pass subscription, just load up any of the Eagles games, the last 4 games of the year, and you will see that Jalen Hurts is the absolute definition of a first read player. What does that mean? Well, you scheme up that first read, he's going to decide one of two things. It's open, throw it, or it's not open, and he's going to scramble and trust his legs. There's no hanging in the pocket. There's no navigating pressure. There's no climbing the pocket and getting to read number 2, progression number 3, and all of that stuff that the elite quarterbacks do. There's none of that at this point in time. Totally something that can be developed, but it needs to be developed. And beyond that, I mentioned his improved accuracy from his time at Alabama, where he looked like a borderline running back on the field with terrible throwing mechanics. Those have improved dramatically, and the amount of growth he has shown over the last 2 years is a big reason that the Eagles are willing to gamble on Hurts, but that accuracy still does have a long ways to go. I would not describe him as an inaccurate passer, but I would not say he has above average accuracy or quality accuracy. He has NFL caliber accuracy, but to become the type of quarterback that this team wants him to be, he's going to have to continue to develop those things. In those 4 games last year, you do see a lot of sprayed balls. You do see him missing outside the numbers down the sideline, even throwing slants in the dirt and throwing behind players in the flat. Like there was some really sporadic accuracy in there that simply put needs to improve. So you combine those two things, the processing and the accuracy, and let's just be honest, there is a short amount of time for Jalen Hurts to dramatically improve those things to the point where the Eagles have enough confidence to go into 2022 with Jalen Hurts as their quarterback. I think in a magical world where he can have 3 years to develop and they can continue to build around him and he can get the best coaching in the world, you could be looking at let's say a Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen type of growth and burst into development as this outstanding quarterback. But time is of the essence here, and if it doesn't happen sooner rather than later here in Philadelphia, that time just might be against Jalen Hurts, because I do think that he's just a player that needs a lot of development, and maybe he's a guy that 4 or 5 years from now he reemerges on a different team, but I'm just being realistic about the situation. I don't feel great about Jalen Hurts in September of 2021. I hope that this summer is just magic for him and he clicks and this Eagles team can get into the NFC East playoff picture, because I really do think that would be the case if everything kind of goes well for him. I think there's a world where he becomes a top 20 quarterback this year. There was moments and quarters and halves here and there when he was playing last year where he looked like that, but it would regress very quickly and teams would adjust and adapt to his specific skill set. So that's the Jalen Hurts rundown. Speaking of rundown, he does bring added value as a runner, and behind this offensive line that we'll preview for a team that really liked heavy personnel in Indianapolis last year with Nick Sirianni, there could be some significantly added benefits to what he brings to the table as a runner that were utilized with Doug Peterson but could be reimagined here. So you can't ever sleep on that. But yeah, this season, Jalen Hurts is a pivot point. There's no denying that, and there's just a lot of unknowns there. But as we sit here today, he ranks 31st, and I really don't think that's a controversial opinion to rank him there at this point in time. And I really hope he exceeds that, because he's a really fun, explosive player on and off the field. You got Joe Flacco as QB2. That's all I'm going to say about Joe Flacco. And then Jamie Newman is QB3, an undrafted free agent pickup here. I'll be honest, I'm not a Jamie Newman guy. There is a massive hive of Jamie Newman truthers that I have learned about. I don't see it with him, and whether this is controversial or not, I don't really care. I respect his decision to opt out, and I don't know if it was his decision or he got bad advice or what, but he needed to play in 2020 to be taken seriously as a draftable prospect. I mean, coming out of Wake Forest, you saw some traits. He's got a quick release, a strong arm, but he just really was, at best, maybe a 6th-round quarterback prospect. You get all that 2nd-round, 3rd-round buzz because of this image of him going to Georgia and getting that last year and that big step up that we just never saw. And then he shows up at the Senior Bowl and just didn't look comfortable. It was a poor decision for Jamie Newman to, let's just say, declare for the 2021 NFL Draft. If he had to opt out, that's fine, but he should have come back to school. And this is just going to make things very difficult, especially on this team where there's very little path to playing time. I think they're going to ride with Jalen Hurts probably throughout the season. There's very little reason to bench him. And just as an undrafted quarterback, it's just hard. Like, draft position matters for these guys as far as how many opportunities you're going to get. So that's all I'm going to say about Jamie Newman. I was not very fond of his film, and I thought he needed to show significant development that we just didn't get to see. So there's a hive for Jamie Newman. I hope he proves me wrong, but I just don't think there's anything there personally. So 31st for the quarterback grade. And I really don't expect a whole lot of pushback from Eagles fans on there. We all see the upside in Jalen Hurts. It's just a matter of him coming out and proving it. Then the running back room, they have a lot of depth with this running back room. You start with Miles Sanders, who is a fan favorite around the league. I mean, you see any running back with the athletic traits and the long speed that Miles Sanders has, and you're going to get excited about the guy. A 2nd-round pick several years ago. And he's been the best back the Eagles have had in quite some time. And, you know, I think you could nitpick and say that he's maybe not in the best system for his skill set. If he was in, say, San Francisco or Tennessee or Green Bay, one of these wide zone offenses that set up the home run a lot better, I think we'd see a lot more production for Miles Sanders. But in this sort of inside zone system that they ran with Doug Peterson, and I expect some changes here with Nick Sirianni, but still a similar kind of West Coast spread feel, I can imagine. I think the criticisms of Miles Sanders are vision and power, which in inside zone, those are going to be more of the inflated traits there. With Sanders, it's, just the athleticism and the juice and the speed that maybe aren't best utilized between the tackles. So that's being nitpicky. I think Miles Sanders is a top 15 running back in the NFL. We're going to talk a little bit more about all these guys' receiving abilities as well, and that's been a big thing holding Miles Sanders back. He was hard to watch trying to catch the football last year. Like, simply put, he had the dropsies. So hopefully he's hitting the jugs machine. But very clearly the Eagles are well prepared as well to take him off the field on passing downs, because they bring in Kerryon Johnson, who is not unlike Miles Sanders. He's got that straight line speed. I would say Kerryon actually plays with a little bit more power than Miles Sanders, and he's also a lot more fluid in the receiving game. I don't think it's entirely out of the realm of possibilities that Kerryon Johnson actually ends up the better running back of these two. The only thing with Kerryon, his health has been just such a detractor to his career. He just hasn't been able to stay on the field for the Lions. They ultimately replaced him with DeAndre Swift, and I'm just probably expecting him to never be a feature back because of a lack of ability to get that workload. But I really like Kerryon Johnson's game, very well balanced, and it was a nice addition to pick him up for free. And then they take Kenneth Gainwell in, the 5th, 6th round here? I mean, my God, he was my number 4 running back in this class. I love Kenny Gainwell, but he's not going to see the field here. I'm kind of mad about it. I compare him to Austin Eckler, super fluid receiving skills out of the backfield. He's got the top speed. He can make guys miss. He's got pretty good vision for a smaller guy. He's got a good chance, I would say, to get a lot of receiving third down work here, depending on how much Kerryon can stay healthy and how much Miles Sanders can improve in that department. But They have plenty of insurance there with KG, and if he gets the playing time, I think he'll shatter this rating here of 71 as a running back. But that's an outstanding third running back. Then you got Jordan Howard, whatever, kind of the Joe Flacco of running backs at this point in a lot of ways. Boston Scott can do some nice things in the receiving game, but that's really what he is, a scat back. Jason Huntley, a poor man's version of Boston Scott. Elijah Holyfield, slow. And Adrian Killens, another one of these scat back types. I can't imagine he makes the team with all these guys in front of him. So you got a ton of depth. You got a diversity of skill sets. No superstars here. And with Miles Sanders, I'm probably not expecting him to emerge as like a top 10 running back. Again, if he was in a different system with more outside stretch running, maybe. But just the vision, the power, it's not always there with Miles Sanders. But the athleticism is just going to help him thrive at this position. So 15th overall for the running back. Not going to make or break their season, but if anything, it will help them on offense as opposed to hurt them. Then the receiving group, this could come back to bite me in the ass, but I kind of like this receiving group. Now, they're going to rank 25th, so let's not get ahead of myself here, but despite the lower ranking here, I kind of like how these different receivers all sort of play into each other. And it starts with DeVante Smith, who I had been mocking them all throughout the pre-draft process, and it just made so much sense for them to take this specific receiver. Even though he was technically my number 3 receiver, I had said even if Jalen Waddle is there, I would take DeVante Smith. Now, Jamar Chase, I think, was a next step up, but anyway, they end up with DeVante Smith after trading down and getting a first-round pick from Miami. That was one of the best moves of the entire offseason, let alone just in the draft. But the reason DeVante Smith makes so much sense for this team, well, number one, we talked about Jalen Hurts being that first read quarterback. And of all of the receivers in this class, DeVante Smith is the receiver that you trust to line up as your primary X receiver. You can draw up any number of route combinations, short, intermediate, and deep, and he can get open against single coverage as that first read. You know, Jamar Chase, he will get there, I think, but doesn't have the route running. And Jalen Waddle also just not there with his game. DeVante Smith, extremely polished, excellent route runner, great athlete. And I think he will be the perfect piece to see if Jalen Hurts can be the guy if you give him a number 1 receiver that can create that nice separation and paint a clearer picture in the secondary for the quarterback. So that is huge. But also, if Jalen Hurts doesn't work out and you look at this receiving core into the future, you also don't have that primary receiver. Jalen Reagor was a first-round pick last year. We'll talk a little bit about him in a second, but probably overdrafted. I had a third-round grade on him. Fulgham, Greg Ward, never going to be that guy. And by drafting DeVante Smith, that makes Reagor your 2, Fulgham your 3, Greg Ward your 4. It's the perfect evolution of this secondary, of these receivers. So he really is the perfect fit for what they needed for this year and the future. I can't speak highly enough of the selection of DeVante Smith. The only thing is going to be, these are the Philadelphia Eagles that have been just decimated by injuries year after year since they won that Super Bowl. And that's the question with DeVante Smith. 170 pounds, can he hold up in the NFL? You really hope. You really hope so, because it drops off so much without him. Jalen Reagor, being the number 2 receiver here, did come on late, and he had a nice chemistry, I think, with Jalen Hurts and was starting to get healthy as the year went on. I'm not writing him off. I still think, a third-round receiver, which is the grade I had on him, you're still looking at really good football players and really good prospects, even if I think they overdrafted him. Lots of second and third round receivers turn into stars. And now that Jalen Reagor, the expectations have shifted. DeVante Smith now takes the number 1 receiver expectations. Reagor becomes a little bit more of an afterthought just with the expectations, but also on the field. He's not going to draw that primary coverage. You can get a little more creative with him and utilize the athletic traits. Now, he was getting open deep in the last month of the season, made some plays, and then there were some other times where there's balls he could have come down with. There was balls that were overthrown, frankly, by Jalen Hurts or underthrown. And there's definitely something there with Jalen Reagor. So hopefully now as the number 2 receiver here, that opens things up for him, and you can get increased return on your investment from last year after you chose not to take Justin Jefferson, which was kind of the obvious pick, but oh, Howie. Then you got Travis Fulgham, now becomes the number 3 wide receiver. In 11 personnel, I think we see probably a combination of Greg Ward and Reagor in the slot with Fulgham as your kind of flanking perimeter receiver. And it kind of had his time in the sun at a 5-6 week stretch, really came down to some tough contested balls. Kind of reminded me of, for baseball fans out there, when you get some random pitcher that throws a measly 89-mile-an-hour fastball who clicks for 2 or 3 months and is just painting the corners, and his curveball gets a little extra bend in it, and he just shows up and then disappears. That's kind of the way I feel about Travis Fulgham. I just don't see the traits there in a full-time starter. So eventually I think you would love to replace him, but now that he becomes your number 3 is just this kind of afterthought, throw a jump ball up to him a couple times a game in pinch situations, you can survive with that. And then Greg Ward's a crafty slot receiver, former quarterback, really stepped up in a lot of big moments last year. I think they're just going to be happy to have him around. They brought him back on the cheap, I think was smart. And then you've got John Hightower and Quez Watkins, who are these just deep, speedy, vertical guys that maybe you can mix in and get to contribute in certain sub packages and stuff. So you run 6 deep of a nice, at least diversified skill set. And I think between Smith and Reagor, I think you're going to get pretty good receiver play. I do think Reagor takes a step up in year 2. And then you got J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, kind of a poor man's Travis Fulgham. Trayvon Grimes is basically J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, but at least he wasn't a second-round pick. You got Khalil Tate. They're going with the converted quarterback thing again. And then Jamon Osborne. Maybe one of those last 4 names makes the team, but I don't think any of those guys are all that good. So if all 4 of those guys end up getting cut and they, cut ties with Arcega-Whiteside, wouldn't be all that surprising if they just went with 6. And then the tight end group. So I've got Dallas Goedert just listed as tight end 1 for a variety of reasons. Number 1, he's just better than Zach Ertz at this point in time. But number 2, I am going to basically project that Zach Ertz will not be on this team. Now, I list him there so you can kind of see how it would look with him there. This is complicated. He has not been moved at this point in time, and maybe by the time I post this video, he will get moved, because there's been trade talks about Zach Ertz for about 4 months. But I think Goedert is the better player at this point in time, certainly as a run blocker, but just honestly more reliable hands at this point. I think you could make a case he's actually a better separator at this stage. Ertz has just been steadily regressing since that Super Bowl year, and whether he's here or not, I don't think you're counting on him to be an alpha tight end. He would be kind of tight end 2, sort of. Like, he's still good. He just isn't what he used to be. So that said, I don't factor him into the receiving grade here. I don't project him to be on this team, whether he gets traded or even cut. But there's a world where they can keep him around. And I mentioned that this team likes to run heavy personnel, or at least the Colts did, with Nick Sirianni coming over from Indianapolis. And you pair that with the running ability of Jalen Hurts, and all of a sudden it makes a lot of sense to still have Zach Ertz on this team. And it wouldn't skyrocket this rating. It would maybe boost it to like a 79 total grade, where it's a 78.1. Like, it would help a little bit, but it really doesn't move the needle significantly. It's just a tough situation to evaluate, but I wanted to kind of show you where it would be with or without Ertz. And then you've got Jason Kroom, who's actually stepped up as a converted converted receiver from University of Tennessee. Just hasn't gotten a lot of opportunities, but he could be the tight end 2 here. Caleb Wilson, an intriguing draft prospect several years ago, but he's bounced around the league and hasn't really developed. Jack Stoll is the guy I have my eyes on. Not probably someone you want to flag for like fantasy purposes, but I actually had a 5th round grade on Jack Stoll. He was in my top tight ends, and Howie Roseman clearly saw a lot of the stuff I saw with Jack Stoll, a guy that ended up losing his job his final year due to injuries at a train wreck program at Nebraska. But his junior year, phenomenal blocker, a guy with 4.6 speed, doesn't have bad hands. I think he is a diamond in the rough, undrafted free agent. I will call my shot on Jack Stoll, especially if Zach Ertz ends up not on this team. I do think Jack Stoll is this team's second best tight end, and due to his good run blocking, is going to get on the field for this team. So Jack Stoll being probably the top undrafted free agent I have my eyes on for this team and around the league. I just have high expectations for him. You got Hakeem Butler, fan favorite guy that I was never very high on. A jump ball receiver that maybe has a Darren Waller emergence converting to tight end here. Just a lot of unknowns there. And same thing really with Tyree Jackson, a former quarterback. So wait and see with those projects. I'm not expecting anything from them, though. Anything you get from them is just free house money. Then the running back contribution. We talked a little bit about these guys, but Miles Sanders, if you can just get the damn ball in his hands, he's great. But it's not so simple. What did he have, like 8 drops last year? Extremely frustrating. They ended up going to guys like Boston Scott just to have someone that they can lean on to catch the damn ball out of the backfield. So they bring in Kerryon Johnson, who should be very reliable in that regard. And then Kenneth Gainwell as well, who I honestly think, if they're smart enough to play him, can be this team's Austin Eckler, which was my comp for him. KG is the guy that I would be excited to see getting on the field on third downs here. It's just, we see oftentimes, especially with receiving backs, coaches don't trust them in pass protection or to be in the right place at the right time. So kind of wait and see there, though. I can say with a decent amount of confidence there that KG would be this team's best receiving back. And then you got Jordan Howard, just not contributing in the receiving game at all. 56th grade as a receiving back. Boston Scott can absolutely contribute if they want to go to him, but just Sanders, Johnson, and Gainwell are all just better players with the ball in their hands than Boston Scott. I imagine they'll keep Scott around because he showed some nice things last year, but best case scenario, he's not seeing the field a ton. You got Huntley, who, like I mentioned, a poor man's version of Boston Scott as that scat back, and Elijah Holyfield, who can do some things but just is not athletic. So really deep group of running backs in the receiving game. They're going to emerge with a good receiving running back, which actually helps this rating out because I think they're going to get some really nice checkdowns and screens. And honestly, Kenneth Gainwell's like a legit route runner that can come out in the slot and just be super versatile. So good impacts from the receiving backs there. The overall receiving grade, as I mentioned, ranking 25th here. I think this group can be somewhat surprising, honestly. The grade came out a little bit higher than I thought, and it obviously comes down to Jalen Hurts and what his development looks like, but I can see a world where if Hurts, let's just say, becomes a starting caliber quarterback, that we're looking at this receiving group saying, you know, they're another receiver away from being a top group. I like a lot of the things they have going here. I think it's one of the more underrated outlooks because it was such a rough room last year. And then the offensive line. This is a unit we're very familiar with, and some people wanted to see the Eagles at 31 where the Lions were, or the Jags at 30, and like the line play in general on offense and defense, we'll get to the D-line here shortly, that is what gives this team such a nice floor and baseline. Like, even if they lose, I think it's going to be losing close games, and they're going to be in it in the fourth quarter, counting on a big play from Jalen Hurts here or there, because when you have here the 5th ranked offensive line and a defensive line that we'll get to their rankings, but it's no surprise, this Eagles defensive line is phenomenal. It just gives you such a good baseline. It helps you do what you want to do and run the plays you want to do and set the tone. It just goes so far. And that is definitely the big reason why the Eagles are going to come in ahead of the Lions and the Jaguars, because this theoretically should be a top 5 offensive line next year. Now, theoretically is a strong word here in Philadelphia because this offensive line has had health questions galore, which honestly I had to factor in here when you have a unit that has had such a hard time staying healthy now over multiple seasons. So the tackle combination here, you've got Lane Johnson at right tackle. I feel pretty good that he will be healthy. I think he just had surgery again, but that's one player that's had a hard time staying healthy. So you hope you can count on 16 games from Lane Johnson. Might not happen. But then at left tackle, I feel very good that you're going to emerge with a starting caliber player. The only problem is neither Mailata or Dillard specifically give me a ton of confidence, but I like having that competition at left tackle. Mailata was pleasantly surprising last year in year 3 of his career. Just an Australian freak athlete that has taken time to develop, that really hadn't played a lot of football, but was mauling dudes in the run game, but is a major question in pass protection. And that's why I do give a slight nod to Andre Dillard. But again, Dillard has had a really tough time staying healthy. And I know Eagles fans are really salty against Andre Dillard because he just really hasn't been there since they spent a first-round pick on him. But I think they want to find out if Andre Dillard can be what they thought they saw in him. But coming out of Washington State, most polished pass protector in that class, in my opinion, needed to maybe beef up a little bit. You hope here in year 3 he has done that. So I do still believe in Andre Dillard, but definitely a make or break season there, and I like having Mailata and Jack Driscoll as well, who was one of my favorite mid-round tackles in last year's class. I actually was comfortable with him in the second, third round. Really nice technique. And I think he could be a left tackle as well. So you really are 3 deep at tackles that I think can play the field. And then your center is Jason Kelce, who is obviously regressing. He has not been the same guy from the Super Bowl years, but still a ton of experience. He's going to get your protections right. Not the most physically imposing guy at this stage in his career, but will still get on the move on screens and stuff, and can get on the move in the run game as well. So still probably a top 15, top 10 center. Kind of in that ballpark. You got Brandon Brooks, should be coming back from injury. Didn't play at all last year, I'm pretty sure. Got injured before the season even started, so plug in one of the best guards in the NFL, top 3 or 5 guard that they didn't have last year. And then you add Landon Dickerson in the top, 40 picks of this draft. Just an absolute beast. He's going to be your long-term replacement at center, but I do see him starting at left guard, where he also played at Alabama. And you have Isaac Seumalo behind him. So this offensive line is super impressive. They're going to be physically imposing really across the board. And I expect this to, if they can stay healthy, which with the Eagles, that's a big if. That's probably why they're not a top 3 offensive line right now, is the health concerns. But if they stay healthy, this should be an elite offensive line, which usually the teams with the elite offensive lines are, let's just say at least competitive. And I didn't even mention Nate Herbig, Matt Pryor. They're going to be fighting for roster spots here because this team is so deep. Ross Pierschbacher as well. So the depth on this offensive line is spectacular. And again, ranking 5th being a significant reason the Eagles were able to come in outside of the 30s in the rankings. So the offense as a whole here is going to rank 30th in the league. It's just the quarterback play. It's the new coaching staff. It's a receiving group that I like some pieces, but you do have a lot of question marks. So it's just a lot of moving pieces. And obviously that quarterback ranking is going to drag this thing down. If Jalen Hurts is any good, everything gets elevated here, and this won't be a bottom 3 offense in the league. But there's definitely reasons to be skeptical as well. Let's not sell this entire thing as optimistic. The scheme should be pretty West Coast. There's actually a lot of similarities between a lot of the stuff that the Colts did last year and what Jalen Hurts was comfortable with at Oklahoma. Most notably, the Lincoln Riley offense, the air raid offense, the heart and soul of that passing game is mesh. The Colts ran more mesh on third down than anybody in the NFL. So I think we see a lot of that, a lot of shotgun, inside zone running. And then I think they also pair in a lot of creative run design stuff that you obviously didn't see in Philadelphia with Phillip Rivers, but stuff that they were trying to do with Jacoby Brissett. 2 tight end packages, especially if Zach Ertz is still around here. So I do expect this to look a lot like the Colts offense from last year that was really well designed. And I think Nick Sirianni has a decent chance to prove a lot of people wrong, because not everyone's in on the Nick Sirianni hire. So now on to the defense with Jonathan Gannon taking over. Basically, I think we're going to see a 4-3 defense. Might be some multiple looks in there, as everyone likes to sprinkle in, but you've got the ties to Eberflus last year, 4-3, and Zimmer as well, going back to his time in Minnesota. I think we see a bit of a a mix of those two defensive schemes, and we'll detail what that means throughout this defensive deep dive. But yeah, the front seven is good, especially the front four. I mean, this is the identity of that Eagles Super Bowl team, and it's still there today, even though these guys are getting older. So starting with the run defense grade here, it starts with Fletcher Cox, Javon Hargrave up in the middle. At this stage in their career, they're actually grading out better as pass rushers than run defenders. Now, that could flip pretty quickly if this team starts winning games. I think a lot of that is just effort and discipline and coaching. That could flip back. I mean, these guys have had great run defense seasons in their past, but have taken a step down really over the last year or two, both these guys, Fletcher Cox and Javon Hargrave. But you still feel very good with those two guys in the middle, one of the better 1-2 punches in the league. But the rest of the interior defensive line depth, you do have some question marks. You bring in Milton Williams, who's probably going to be this kind of hybrid edge interior piece that probably won't see a lot of early down work in this upcoming season. You got Ridgeway, who's kind of a rotational guy. McGill, the same. I do like the Marlon Tuipulotu pick. It's tough to be a great run defender as a rookie, but Marlon Tuipulotu could be that. Just a really disciplined, strong player coming out of USC. A better run defender than a pass rusher, so he's probably the depth guy that could step in and be a high-impact kind of early down run defender that lets you have Fletcher Cox and Javon Hargrave rest up a little bit more for those pass rush situations. Otherwise, they might lean on Cox and Hargrave to really stay in good shape and play a ton this year. The depth not quite what it's been over the last few years. You got Willie Henry and Raekwon Williams. Not expecting much there if they even make the team. But then the edge depth, the Eagles always love to have good edge group here. So Brandon Graham, still a phenomenal run defender. He's so strong. He's one of the strongest pound-for-pound edge players in the entire league, and that shows up in run defense, and such a disciplined, smart veteran. So you're very happy with what he brings to the table on the edge. Derek Barnett is fine. A bigger body dude, not the best sideline to sideline containability, but you could do a lot worse than him. You got Josh Sweat, also kind of rotates with Derek Barnett on early downs. He's pretty solid. Ryan Kerrigan, probably more of a third down veteran pass rush specialist. Has not been a good run defender for the last couple of years. You got Goedert Avery, who's might play some kind of on-ball 4-3 under linebacker or hand-in-the-dirt edge. He's going to be kind of a flexible piece for Gannon, but he's actually been a good run defender. He is incredibly strong as well. He does not struggle to get off blocks as 6 foot, 250 pounds. He's just kind of a physical handful for offensive tackles. And then you've got the couple of rookies there, Teron Jackson and Patrick Johnson. And they're not good run defenders really at all, though they might contribute more as pass rushers that we'll talk about. As for the linebacking group, they don't have a lot of linebackers on roster. This team is kind of infamously doesn't really care about their linebacking group. But that said, TJ Edwards is kind of a stud as a run defending linebacker. Has his questions as far as coverage and all that stuff, but I do like TJ Edwards, and they clearly do too, because they didn't spend a lot to replace him as their Mike linebacker. Alex Singleton as well played really well last year. Maybe a more limited player, but had some splash plays. I think that he'll be on there, especially in base defense. And then they get Eric Wilson over from Minnesota, which I like the addition. He got some Pro Bowl votes, or at least some Pro Bowl discussion there in Minnesota, stepped up decently well with Anthony Barr missing the entire season, and he's got a lot of experience. He's a good athlete. He's a miserable run defender, though, and we're going to talk more about Wilson as a cover player. But for a weak side linebacker in a base 4-3 that they're going to be in 15% of the time, he's just fine. So the run defense is kind of smack dab in the middle. I am a little bit worried about the interior depth and maybe leaning a little bit too much on Cox and Hargrave there. So that might ding this a little bit, but overall, this is a high-effort, high-caliber defensive front that should not have major issues defending the run. Might not be the best run defense in the league, but I think they'll definitely hold their own as well. But when it comes to the pass rush here, it's a little better. I mentioned Fletcher Cox and Hargrave have actually been better pass rushers than run defenders as of late, and the same thing applies to Brandon Graham. these guys are just excellent pass rushers in general. They were at the top last year in total pass rush, pressures, sacks, whatever metric you need to look at to justify what makes a good pass rush. They will get the job done, and they run deep as well. But let's spend a little bit more time on the starters. Fletcher Cox turns 31 this year, and just maybe not the same explosion as he once had, but still a guy that's getting you 50, 60 pressures, probably nearing double-digit sacks, still one of the best interior pass rushers in the game. Next to him, you got Javon Hargrave, who has actually on a snap-by-snap basis been more efficient than Fletcher Cox. He's been phenomenal when he's been out there, and he's got a nice combination of power and long arms and some quickness on the inside. It was a weird signing when they made it, but with Malik Jackson gone now, you can see now why they want Javon Hargrave. I think he's going to be much better here in year 2 with Philadelphia, and they will be very happy to have him. So excellent interior duo, and then you're getting pressure from the edge as well with Brandon Graham, who is one of the premier, if not the premier, pocket-pushing edge rushers in the league. He can also step inside and provide some relief if Hargrave or Cox need to come off the field. He can play that 3 technique, and then you're bringing in Josh Sweat, Ryan Kerrigan. You're even going to have Milton Williams in the mix there, as well as this uber athletic, freaky dude, like Aaron Donald caliber type of athlete as a kind of hybrid defensive end. So you just have tons of flexibility. To talk a little bit more about the individual depth there, Derek, and we didn't even talk about Derek Barnett on the other side, who's really solid. So I'm kind of all over the place, but that's really how it feels with this Eagles pass rush, so it's kind of fitting. They just come in tons of different angles. They're all guys that play with an element of power, which is where that overwhelming feel comes from. So you love your front 4, and then Josh Sweat will kind of split reps with Derek Barnett, both those guys in the final year of their contract. So they're going to want to find out who they should pay and who's the better player and all that stuff. Both those guys offer different aspects. Sweat was a 3rd-round pick back in 2018 who really came on last year and frankly might have more upside than Derek Barnett, just physically speaking. So they're going to offer a really nice 1-2 punch as your 4th best pass rusher. So that's nice. And then Ryan Kerrigan, whatever you get from him is house money. He's really just a backup and someone that can come in different sub packages. Gennard Avery is a powerful pocket pusher as well that can get in there on blitz packages. It's a really impressive group of pass rushers. They run really 8 deep there. Ridgeway can do some nice things as well. And they even brought in Patrick Johnson, really is the rookie I would talk about there. Because I'm not a big Teron Jackson fan. I didn't see a ton with him. But Patrick Johnson has a lot of get-off and finesse and just ability to get the edge. So not someone that converts speed to power, talking about Patrick Johnson there out of Tulane. But I do think he's a better player than Teron Jackson. I found it interesting that they took Jackson first. And I could just be wrong there, and Jackson's a good player. But I actually have higher expectations for Patrick Johnson, so I'll call my shot on that one. So sorry for being a little bit all over the place, but that's kind of how this pass rush is just overwhelming, hits you in different angles. Again, with the pass rush and the offensive line, this is what's going to give the Eagles a really nice floor, and is ultimately what pushes them up above some of those teams like the Jags and the Lions, who just are not going to get after the quarterback, whereas the Eagles are going to be, despite the rest of the issues on this team, they're going to be one of the best teams in the league at pressuring the quarterback. And then the linebacking group, not a good group of linebackers. It tends to happen when you literally do not invest in this position. TJ Edwards, really good run defender, not so much in coverage. He's got some speed and some upside there. He was actually my top 10 breakouts list last year, and it didn't really happen. He had a decent season, so I think you could do worse than him as a starter. And then Singleton, I think, will play that base role with Eric Wilson coming in as more of that sub linebacker, the cover linebacker here. Which is a nice compliment because Singleton, if he struggles in coverage, he's a little better in run defense. Eric Wilson, not a good run defender, but good coverage instincts, kind of some safety feel. He's got the length. My pro comp for Jabril Cox, who went to the Cowboys, was Eric Wilson. A lot of people really liked Jabril Cox. I was a little bit lower on him, but just maybe a nice little comparison there. And I think he'll probably provide better coverage than what they got last year. But you also have Davion Taylor, who was a kind of a dime linebacker, safety type at Colorado. In year 2, do we see an upgrade from him? I would think. Linebackers, they just take a long time in the NFL, usually a full season. So I don't know how much he'll see the field. There could be a world where Wilson and Davion Taylor kind of become the dime linebackers here, with TJ Edwards being more of the base guy and Singleton gets phased out. We'll keep an eye on that. I don't know how much I'm expecting there. Certainly possible. And then Sean Bradley as well is kind of a project linebacker at Temple, but a really good athlete, and actually made some plays last year when he got on the field, so can't rule him out quite yet. And yeah, there's your linebacking group. It ranks 30th. It's not controversial. This team doesn't invest in this position, and they know that this is not really going to make or break their defense, because it's just hard for a linebacking group to do that. But it's also not going to be a strength, and they're not going to be eliminating the middle of the field like some other teams with great linebacking cores can do. Then the defensive backs. This is a big reason this team comes in 29th in the power rankings. It's going to rank 30th as a whole. You got Darius Slay as your number 1 corner, who I'm not even going to say is great. Like, he's really not been much more than an average corner over the last 2 years. He's kind of lost his confidence. He's getting up there in age. The Lions seem to have gotten rid of him at the perfect time. Now, they put a lot of pressure on Darius Slay, but he should still play better than he has, really going back to 2019. So, a new system. He could get back to being that top 5 corner that he once was, but we're kind of too far removed from that at this point for me to have that much confidence in him. Still a quality starter, but not an impact player. Probably a number 2 corner for the best secondaries. And some teams, he'd be their number 3. But then Avonte Maddox, I'm excited to see how they use him. I've always liked Avonte Maddox, but he's actually kind of struggled in the slot, which is counterintuitive because he's that short, just elite quickness type of corner, which typically means he's a slot guy. But this system could potentially be running a lot of cover 2 and quarters on the outside if they're going to replicate the Eberflus Zimmer kind of background here. And if that's the case, I think Avonte Maddox could actually step out and have a decent year as an outside corner in kind of the Darius Williams role. But it's far from a guarantee. He's been incredibly up and down. He probably wouldn't be a starter for most secondaries in the league, and he's their number 2. Then they have a competition really between Zach McPherson and Josiah Scott, who are like project depth pieces. Like, McPherson is a heady player, good in zone coverages, should be good for this system, but as a rookie, you don't want to lean on that. A 4th-round rookie out of Texas Tech. Josiah Scott, they traded for from Jacksonville, kind of a slot guy with good ball skills. It's ugly, man. And then after that, my goodness, you got Craig James, Kevin Seymour, Michael Jacquet, Nate Meters. Lavert Hill was an interesting undrafted pickup who ended up here. Keep an eye on him. Graylin Arnold, Shaquille Taylor. Yuck, dude. This is the worst group of corners in the NFL. The only thing saving this is obviously Darius Slay as your number 1. You could do a lot worse than that. But these safeties are pretty good. I like Anthony Harris, and I like Rodney McLeod. And I think you're going to see kind of a split safety defense here. These guys running a lot of quarters, cover 3, where either of these guys can rotate down into the box, man coverage. It helps to have those 2 safeties over the top. I think this upgrade getting Anthony Harris is going to be nice to have for a secondary that can tend to give up a lot of big plays. That said, Anthony Harris had a really down year for Minnesota last year and was a guy that, graded out as a top safety for a couple years in Minnesota, but never really was taken seriously. And sure enough, he kind of regressed back to being just a good safety, not a star safety, but should still be a nice upgrade there. And then Marcus Epps really stepped up in year 2 for this secondary. He's going to have to fend off Kayvon Wallace, who was a good 4th-round pick out of Clemson. So you run 4 deep. You got Jacoby Stevens, who also keep an eye on him in that linebacker conversation. He's going to be kind of that bandit safety, box safety type of dude. So we'll see if he gets on the field. I don't have expectations in year one, but I thought it was a good pick. I liked Jacoby Stevens. I had, I think, a 4th to a 5th round grade on him. Was awarded that legendary number 7 at LSU, which is not easy to get. And then don't like Andrew Adams. I don't like Elijah Riley. So they rank 30th for the defensive backs. Really, you're pointing at this and the quarterbacks and the just the coaching turnover in general as to why this team projects at 29th. Because there's a lot to like as well throughout this defense. So the defense as a whole does rank 23rd. I mean, you have the 6th best pass rush in the NFL. It's just going to give you a nice floor. But they're going to be kind of matchup dependent. Like if they go up against good offensive lines, like if you can block this front, you're going to obliterate this secondary. But there's about half the teams in the league might not get the opportunity to exploit the secondary because they can't block all these guys. So definitely a matchup dependent defense. And in those games where they're giving up a bunch of points and getting lit up in the secondary, I don't know how much I trust this offense getting into shootouts. But the defensive coaching actually going to come in 23rd. Part of that is all of the veteran leadership you get from Fletcher Cox, Javon Hargrave, Brandon Graham. Like that is kind of factored in. Just I think it's going to be a nice transition. I actually kind of believe in Gannon, and I think the system's going to be sound there. So a little bit of a projection, but I think just the coaching and cohesiveness of this defense, I think it's going to work pretty well. I think we're going to see a solid defense here. The home field will be good. And we've kind of talked about this being sort of a 4-3 split safety defense. I expect a lot of quarters coverages, probably some cover 2 influences from Matt Eberflus, and a nice balance of everything else. Mike Zimmer, if you're going to look at this being a sort of Zimmer defense, Zimmer has always been heavily dependent on really mixing up those coverages. So I think we'll see a lot of that here in Philadelphia as well. Just a recap of the team overall, you got offense 30th, defense 23rd, special teams 28th. The kicking game struggled. They don't have a ton of depth that you want to lean on here for the coverage unit, so they got a lot of work to do with this special teams, and they cost this team some games last year as well. They got a lot to clean up and a lot to prove with the special teams. And then the culture as a whole, it does rank 25th. You get all these leaders and these superstars sticking around here, both on the offense and the defensive line. And it just does help ease things in with the new coaching staff. It's going to be a new staff, but it's not a completely new team, right? It's not like Jacksonville or Detroit, some of these teams we've talked about where they're like rebuilding a whole new culture. That's not really the deal here in Philadelphia. There's still going to be kind of division-winning expectations and these players that have won a Super Bowl and know the ins and outs, and there's still a lot of integral parts of the day-to-day operations that are still going to stay the same here in Philadelphia. So that's another thing that would set them above, Detroit and Jacksonville, who maybe have a better future outlook, so to speak. But just less to figure out there, I would say. And so the strengths and weaknesses, to kind of recap that for this team, the pass rush, we've beaten that into the dirt. The offensive line, we've beaten that into the dirt. But that's really what they're going to do to other teams, is beat that into the dirt. They are going to be a physically minded team. Having a true identity to lean on is something that can go a long way in the NFL, and the Eagles do have that. They have that culture of, we are going to beat the shit out of you at the line of scrimmage, and that's a lot more than some teams can say. But then their weaknesses, obviously the quarterback uncertainty is going to make or break this team's entire season. The secondary is rough. You are really counting on Avonte Maddox or a free agent signing along the road, or Zach McPherson being this diamond in the rough 4th-round pick. That cornerback room is hideous. The receivers, a potential weakness here, but could be a bit of a strength depending how good Rager and DeVante Smith can be. And then just the overall staff uncertainty. It's hard to project, great coaching here because we just haven't seen these guys. And then that takes us to their schedule, where I'm going to go through my Vegas over-under and their win total expectations. It's a really rough start to their season. They have at Atlanta and at Carolina in there, as well as at Dallas. I do think they win one or two of those games, but you also look at San Francisco, Kansas City, and Tampa Bay. One theme for this team is I would so much rather get teams like Denver, the Raiders, Detroit, the Jets. I'd rather get those teams at home and have to go to San Francisco, go to Kansas City, go to Tampa Bay, go to New Orleans, games that you're probably not going to win anyway. So that's a rough draw for Philly. Like if they were at home against Atlanta or home against Carolina, home against Detroit, home against Denver, like they're probably winning those games, home against the Jets, but they have to go on the road for all of those winnable games. And I think ultimately that bites them in the ass and is a bad draw for them. So I have them starting 1-7 because of how rough that schedule is. Now, there's winnable games in there, and certainly teams that line play might be a question mark, which could give the Eagles the nod. But then finishing really with wins against New Orleans at home, Washington at home, and the Giants at home, and losing the rest of the way and going 4-13 on their season. Really not a favorable schedule, the way it all shaped up, the way I described the home and away splits there. And I have them going under their over-under of 6.5 wins. Just looking at this schedule, I actually think that's a pretty good bet. I'm sorry, Eagles fans, but I am willing to bet against Jalen Hurts and bet on this team sitting there next year with a top 3 pick and a first-rounder from the Colts and a first-rounder from the Dolphins, and having serious conversations about which quarterback they're going to draft next year. I think that's really the likely outcome for this Eagles team. It's not a guaranteed outcome, a guaranteed prediction. I just think that's the side of the coin I land on. But it should be an interesting season. A lot of moving pieces, an exciting, explosive quarterback to see what he can do. He's going to be fun to watch, Jalen Hurts. Just maybe not necessarily betting on him, but let me know in the comments down below, is this a good ranking? Eagles fans, what'd you think of the breakdown? Let me know in the comments as well who you think comes next. Make sure you like that video as well if you haven't yet, and if you're new here and you enjoy the video, also subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the reveal of number 28 and everyone else left to come. But until next time, peace, and we'll see you in about 3 days for the next deep dive. Cheers.